The whole city was freaking out. And then these physicists showed up with these portable proton accelerators and blew the roof off of Manhattan high-rise. None of this rings a bell?
It happened 20 years before we were born. I believe it.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
Alright everybody, I am Kevin from The Real Movie Guys, and you are watching The Real Review, a series where we review and discuss all your favorite movies. And don't forget, if you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel today. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Ghostbusters Afterlife. When a single mom and her 2 kids arrive in a small town, they begin to discover their connection to the original Ghostbusters and the secret legacy their grandfather left behind. Who you gonna call, I think, regardless if you have seen the films. Anyone who hears those 4 words knows exactly what you're talking about. It's rare when a franchise like Ghostbusters can become so ingrained in society. The now iconic 1984 comedy horror film has been able to stand the test of time unlike many of its peers and has developed what can only be described as a very dedicated following. Just see the 2016 documentary Ghost Heads for more information. To me personally, Ghostbusters has always been a special film, and to a lesser extent than 1986, The Real Ghostbusters animated series, and the 1989's Ghostbusters 2, even if it is a less successful carbon copy of the first film. To no one's surprise, after the critical and controversial entry Ghostbusters 2016, any hopes of getting a true sequel to the original series were almost gone until it was announced a sequel set after the events of the first film was in the works. After what seems like a lifetime, Ghostbusters Afterlife is the sequel fans should have always gotten, honoring the original film and bringing the franchise forward for a new generation of fan to experience. While the film may suffer from one-dimensional characters and a little bit of too much retread as far as nostalgia, leading to a plot we can all see coming a mile away, Afterlife is able to succeed where the past entries failed in reviving this spooky franchise with the one element the first film excelled in: heart. It's hard to remember when the idea of fan service became such an ugly word in the film industry, considering ironically most of these films rely on their fan bases, but to some extent I can certainly understand where some of that distaste originates from. Many more recent iterations of past franchises tend to lean on the all too common "remember this character or event from that movie you love," and certainly Afterlife does do this. The difference is that instead of using it loosely as a dressing over the plot, it is stitched in lovingly to help make those nostalgia bits feel genuine and cohesive in the world. Yes, some of the jokes and nods are simply there to make a longtime fan chuckle, like the myriad of visual Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the film. It's the more intriguing way, though, that the nostalgia is used in emotional beats that resonated with me. For example, the way Phoebe finds connections with her estranged grandfather through simple supernatural encounters feels, for lack of a better explanation, like Ghostbusters. The Ghostbusters feel is due to the balancing act the original was able to walk, keeping the laughs on par with the scares, but never fully scary. This film does the same in keeping the comedy up to par with the scare factor, but also adding a new wrinkle and making this more of a family story, which truly fits what this film more likely represents to fans. Most original fans at this point have children, and it's a beautiful sentiment that they are able to share their love of this franchise in a relatively family-friendly setting with their children. One of the more interesting choices to help keep the film on track with the previous entry was to reuse what feels like most of the original film's score. The familiar beats and tones help craft that 80s nostalgic atmosphere, never feeling out of place even when newer cues are spread throughout. No pun intended, but the overall spirit of this film is to feel like a story ripped right out of the 80s, and it's successful, feeling like a mashup of the Ghostbusters meets the Goonies, having a flair for the adventure with a slowly peeled back mystery, while also making the coming-of-age story feel compelling. Unfortunately, I think many people will make a strong comparison between this and the Netflix series Stranger Things, and aesthetically, I don't think they're wrong. However, I do feel the identity of this film is its own as a Ghostbusters movie, and besides, the setup of a ragtag group of kids going on an adventure, that is the plot that just about every 80s family film shares. That is where the comparison ends. The most beautiful aspect of this film, besides retaining that classic feel of the original, is that when it comes right down to it, this film is a love letter to the late Harold Ramis, who passed away in 2014. Throughout this film's entire runtime, the love and respect Jason Reitman showed towards Harold Ramis's memory is certainly remarkable. Jason Reitman showed this film script to his father, Ivan Reitman, the director of the first 2 films, as well as Harold Ramis's family, so he could get their approval before officially starting the project. Jason had stated in an interview interview that his father cried tears of joy when he saw the film's first cut, and Violet Ramis, Harold's daughter, was also supportive of the film, giving it her blessing. It's also interesting that this film was finally able to get Bill Murray back on board, who for years was notoriously one of the reasons a true third film never came to fruition. While of course I won't go into any spoilers, I would ask you to really listen closely to some of the dialogue towards the end of this film, involving the original cast, and maybe it's just me, but their dialogue really felt genuine, as if it was the words that they had always wanted to say to Ramis, but never got the chance to. The spectacular practical and special effects took me by surprise in Afterlife. When it made sense, the film seemed to have attempted to go as practical as possible, using the two in unison for a grander execution. Best example of this is how with the Demidog, they established its presence using an extremely well done puppet animatronic. Then after the visual is cemented in your mind, the film introduces the fluid CGI to capture the more complex movements. The trick is that your mind is always falling back on that initial visual image, helping to mentally sell the CGI movements more convincingly. I want to clarify that I don't think the CGI effects alone slack at all either. To me, this feels more like a natural progression of the effects from the original, almost like they had finally achieved the look that they had always wanted now that technology is available. That's not to say that all the implementations of CGI worked for me. I think the detractors will point to one scene in this film where maybe the nostalgia was a bit too much, that being the mini puffs causing havoc in a Walmart. These undeniably cute mascots serve little more than to sell toys and work as an unapologetic product placement. The fact that the scene is set in a Walmart with products like Ben & Jerry's clearly standing out did turn my stomach a bit. I think any fan of the franchise would have to admit that the reason it's survived as long as it has is part and due to the toys and merchandise. But unlike everything else in this film, this felt the most blatant and in your face, almost as if they couldn't find a logical place to put it, so they just shoved it in. Luckily, like I said, the mini puffs are cute and the situations they put themselves in are offbeat and funny, so I can give this off-road course a bit of a pass, but its unnatural inclusion still rubs me the wrong way. Without strong personalities, it would have been nearly impossible for the original Ghostbusters concept to have worked as well as it did, and it's here with Afterlife where I have some conflicting feelings. The film is entirely the McKenna Grace show who plays Phoebe, and for such a young girl, she absolutely knocks it out of the park. She not only is believable as the awkward grandchild of Egon Spengler, but takes that role and layers it with her own personality. As a child blessed with incredible intelligence, she makes the role endearing, and she's fully aware of her social faults, doing her best to overcome them with a running gag where she tells jokes to break the ice and connect with people. This performance could have been interpreted as just someone playing a young female version of Egon, but the story is composed around the performer so well that the coming-of-age tale blends beautifully with her performance, allowing her to draw the audience in, creating a strong attachment to see her grow. This all comes with a caveat, however. Everyone else in the film comes across as one note or just there to further along her story. You have some talented actors cast here as well. Finn Wolfhard, which does not help the Stranger Things connection, plays her brother Trevor, and his screen time is limited to about a few scenes of bonding with the classic Ghostbusters car, and some side plot shenanigans that go absolutely nowhere. Paul Rudd is, as always, incredibly likable as the summer teacher Gary Gruberson, but little more than a comedic plot mover to help explain the more scientific elements of the story. Carrie Coon, who plays Phoebe's mother Callie, also has a potentially interesting story with her deep despise for her father leaving her as a child, but beyond some cliche dialogue, it never felt any deeper. Logan Kim was the one character that I thought had the most potential as Phoebe's new quirky friend podcast, but at the end of the day, he's just there to bounce off her and is diluted to being one note. Now, I'm coming across like this is all super negative, and I think interpreting it that way is justified, but the film sacrifices these characters to make the lead character and the story around her more engaging. It's a trade-off that I wish the film didn't decide to make, but at the same time, I'd be lying if I said it didn't work. I think the film does the absolute best thing by making everyone super likable. That way we are less inclined to criticize their lack of dimension, since we are charmed into submission. Phoebe is an excellent character, and the more cliched story becomes more engaging thanks to her. So if the other characters just have to exist to strengthen her, then it's well worth it in this instance. Ghostbusters Afterlife has somehow found new life after a few sequels that just couldn't hit the mark. Charming, funny, and somewhat more emotionally engaging than I previously thought, Afterlife captures the magic of the original while making its existence engaging for both the new and old fans of the franchise. Of course, the movie has its faults with a somewhat unoriginal story and one-dimensional characters, but just because you've heard the story before, that is no reason to automatically dismiss it, especially when the story is adding its own unique and engaging take on it. After years of forgetting that this ghostly series once had a soul and ignoring what fans of the original always wanted, it's nice to see that the heart of the series was always there and fans rewarded for their loyal dedication. This all leads me to my final score. I'm going to give Ghostbusters Afterlife an A-.
1 second.
Phoebe, you're...
I'm a scientist.
Nostalgia, when used correctly, is such a powerful tool in crafting new ideas from some of our favorite stories. Maybe my review is impacted a bit by my own nostalgia for the series, but any film that can bring me back to the good old days of sipping Hi-C Ecto Cooler and busting ghosts with the family vacuum cleaner, well, that sounds fun to me. If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, you should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.